All right, yeah, it's all the weird stuff. So being the guy at Andreessen Horowitz who gets to invest in all the weird stuff, what makes you uniquely qualified for that job?
Well, that's a good question. I think, you know, what do we do? I mean, up to my background, I was an entrepreneur and I was an angel investor. A lot of what we do is we just, you know, we try to identify interesting trends and then sort of great people you know, who are starting companies around those trends. And so, you know, a lot of it is just experience, having done it myself and invested a lot. You know, hopefully that will lead to good results.
So when you talk about identifying those interesting trends, you have invested in stuff like Bitcoin, VR, drones, Soylent. What's the common thread between all of those investments, or is there one? Does there have to be one?
I mean, I think if you look back on the history of the technology industry, one of the most important leading indicators is kind of what like hobbyists and developers are excited about. I wrote a blog post where I call it what the smartest people do on the weekends is what everyone else will be doing at work in 10 years or something. And if you go back and you look at, I mean, there's a reason why you know, Steve Jobs and Woz were in a garage and they were hobbyists and there was a homebrew computer club. If you think about it, there's you know, we have so many institutions, companies, government institutions, et cetera, whose goals are to do things over the next 2 to 3 years. Particularly like public companies, you know, they really think on a quarter by quarter basis, right? So where in the world are there people who are thinking about the next things that are going to happen over the next 10 years? Like academia is one of them, so we always look a lot at universities. And the second one is you know, sort of what the smartest hackers will do on the weekends, right? Because on the weekends they control their own time. They're not, you know, their boss at whatever company is not telling them what to do. They're going and they're doing what they love to do. And if you see what those people are excited about right now, they're excited about Bitcoin, they're excited about VR, they're excited about drones, they're excited about 3D printing. And that has historically been a very good indicator for kind of where the future is going. It's an indicator for two reasons. One is they're smart and they tend to gravitate towards interesting things. The other thing is those are the people that create the future, right? I mean, so like one way to look at Bitcoin, if you read some of the media around Bitcoin, they'll say, oh, it's this, you know, fictional currency, et cetera. Like that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is it's probably the largest software development organization in the world, in the sense that there are 10,000 plus very, very smart hackers building applications and things on top of it. You know, I mean, Google is, you know, 50,000 people, but most of those people are, you know, working on optimizing some, you know, advertising or something. There aren't many, you know, groups of 10,000 hackers working on new things. I like to say, you know, kind of GitHub is the new Bell Labs. Like if you go back and you look at where, you know, Unix and C and all these incredibly important computer science inventions came out of Bell Labs. You know, today the equivalents of those are Linux, Python. Those are all open source Docker, right? These are all open source projects.
So your job is basically just to like find all the geeks and hang out with them and see
a little bit
play around with the,
like the analogy would be like in the old days you'd go to Bell Labs and you'd see what they're working on. Today you'd go to GitHub and see what's trending. Like that's kind of the where you look for the, you know, for the sort of the frontier of innovation.
Okay, so let's say you identify one of those trends that you think is interesting, that they think is interesting, people are geeking out on, hacking on. How do you pick companies within those different segments in extremely nascent markets?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think of it as like in venture capital, if you invest in a known trend, so you invest in big data or something, like big data is happening, like, you know, meaning the Fortune 1000 companies are want to buy products to help them analyze the large data sets they've been collecting. So you're not really like taking a risk on the trend, but you are taking a risk on which company will succeed there, right? With these kinds of sort of futuristic kind of investments, you're really sort of making a two-part bet. It's like a two-stage rocket or something, right? You're betting on the trend happening, will Bitcoin work, for example, and then you're betting on a particular company. Right, and so your question is how do you, so first you identify the trend and then you invest in the company, and that's, you know, there's no science to that. A lot of it is frankly you're investing in people. You know, these things, what ends up happening is there's so many twists and turns along the life of a startup that kind of the only constant you have is people. So sometimes we get like with Oculus, I think we got it right, both on the trend and on the company. Other times, maybe the trend doesn't happen, or we get the wrong company or something. So a lot of it, it's just a lot of it is it's a people business. You meet a lot of people. We try to evaluate them and make bets.
So when you're looking at something like Bitcoin, for instance, how do you normally just pick one company to back, or do you try to find multiple companies to spread it around a little bit?
That's a good question. So like most large venture capital firms have a policy of not investing in competing companies. Right. That's because, so when we invest in a company, we make a commitment to the entrepreneurs that we're backing you and we're not going to back someone who competes with you. How you divide up what it means to be competitive is a complicated question. So for example, in Bitcoin, I'm on the board of Coinbase. We invested in Coinbase, which is doing kind of, they have a hosted wallet. You can basically go to Coin if you want to buy Bitcoin. I recommend you go to Coinbase. You can, transfer from dollars into Bitcoin, buy it. You can also, there's an exchange you can trade. They're sort of, we think of it as kind of the infrastructure layer. And then on top of that, there will be applications built around Bitcoin. And in fact, they haven't been announced yet, but we made 2 seed investments recently in applications on top of it, which we think aren't competitive. And of course, we check with the companies and everything else. But yeah, so it's sort of this complicated question of how do you kind of divide things up. But for the most part, we make one bet per idea or something, category.